Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Heartland Mamas. I'm Murray Briel.
And I'm Heidi Henry, coming to you from two separate studios at the edge of the Great Red Divide. Every Tuesday and Thursday at 3 o'clock, you can hear our progressive news and views that you can use right here on Facebook. You can also catch all of our previous episodes at heartlandmamas.com. That's MAMAS.com. All podcast platforms, YouTube, and proudly part of the Demcast USA network. So, oh, and don't forget independent radio. You can catch Heartland Mamas on Rolled extended cut. So, and we'll get you the days and times for that too coming out. Murray, today we're going to
Yes.
talk about the balance of power. So you want to go ahead and introduce our topic for today because
Oh,
I'm down on this one. So,
absolutely. Totally. So we all know that we've been frustrated over time with things like the filibuster. Heidi and I brought that to your attention before. We're frustrated with gerrymandering. We're frustrated with everything having to do with not representing the people's voice, but representing special interests.
right.
So we took a look and said, hey, maybe we should see what we could do to potentially do better with this. And
Right.
Robert Reich wrote an article, and it was a great article, and it was kind of a launching point for
Yep.
Heidi and I to go off on today's show. And, I think one of the most important things we have to remember is that we have to be represented, and we forget that our voice is how we're represented. And
Right.
then, yeah, so we're going to start off and talk a little bit about, the imbalance of power and how it came from. And we'll go back way in history because, I'm the history buff of us. And you look back to the founding of our nation, right?
Mm-hmm.
There was a big division even then, anti-federalists and federalists. So we've got some folks who want to keep everything individual and give states power, right? And the other ones who want it
Right.
consolidated so that we
Right.
could be successful and productive. And if you go back, when we dig into history, the Federalists didn't want a minority to
To rule.
control. They wanted a majority. And that goes back to leaving England and European countries where kings and monarchies and feudal lords would have this like ultimate power.
But then you have the sparsely populated slave owning states, and only 5% of that population owned a huge amount of population. And they wanted to make sure that they had equitable voice, even though they weren't counting slaves as actual people. And so they came up with the Electoral College, and they came up with filibuster, which was just a pie in the sky thought
That's
process.
it, Heidi. I
They
want
came
our
up with
listeners to
yeah.
think about this. You just nailed it, but I really want to pull what you said out so everybody pays attention. Okay, here it is, guys. Even back in the founding of our nation, a tiny group of rich, entitled,
5%.
powerful men
5%.
was able to have enough power to create a system that has caused an imbalance since the founding of our nation. It's the
250, 46
Republicans we
years.
talk about, right, with their filibusterings and not passing legislation and all these various things, but we think about it, and that's been the case since the beginning of time, since the
Yeah.
beginning of our nation. Then we look at the Southern Strategy, which came to be. And it does revolve around a small group of powerful white men. And
Very
most
well.
of those powerful white men got their power from slavery, from the selling, transporting of slaves, as well as the forced labor that gave them their wealth. So, of course, they designed it to disenfranchise everyone but themselves.
Well, in Murray, that was then, and those I mean, we're living Jim Crow right now without the official name. We are living Jim Crow 2.0 right now, and everybody knows it, and everybody needs to talk about it. And shame, shame, shame on you if you think that your lily white skin makes you more important than somebody who isn't. So anyway, the but the balance of power now has shifted, and it's still the fossil fuel guys, and we're talking coal and oil, natural gas, that hold a lot of the balance of power, and they're prohibiting our nation and our world, our global world, from moving forward out of fossil fuels and into renewable fuels to the point where it's going to kill us. And it's a small amount of people that control that, just like it's a small amount of people that control the NRA, that controls gun legislation for all of us, and allowed another mass shooting to happen again yesterday. At some point, the people have to take care of their take back their power, and take back control of their country. We almost did that with FDR, and after FDR in the 40s, we made it all the way up until Nixon and then Ronald Reagan, and we've had 45 years of neoliberal economic policy that has bankrupted the middle class, has squished it, and made us a working class on
And
our way to the
Heidi,
feudal system.
you're right. And our education system is part of that problem.
Oh,
Our
God.
education system was designed by James Madison. Or I'm sorry, no, Thomas Jefferson. James Madison was
Jefferson,
on
yeah.
Hamilton's side. Was designed by Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson got the idea for American education from the Parisian education system. And it was designed specifically to ingrain ultimate submissiveness to higher authority. So it was made to have a very tiny amount who go through school, become leaders, and the rest
All the way
followers,
through.
the rest workers. And we do that in our own country. Even right now, we have schools where only the average over the nation is 30% of kids are expected to achieve in public schools.
Right.
And then 60% of those kids are expected to subsist. And
Yeah.
that's how we teach. So it goes all the way through because remember, guys, this whole system was designed by a small group of wealthy, powerful men who wanted to keep their power. That's why they wanted to keep states' rights. That's why we have so many states' rights.
That's why we have the
And
Electoral College.
that's why we have guns running rampant.
Yep.
And so that brings us to how our government system fails us. So
Right.
the founders, the Federalist Papers in Federalist 22, Federalist 35, Federalist 55, in multiple Federalist Papers, and those are just the ones I can mention off the top of my head, there was a strong argument against everything that we're seeing right now, against the filibuster,
It's like they can
against
see this happening. They
it
can
was
see
in
this happening. The
yes,
death
they
of
did.
democracy. Yeah. They
But
can see how democracy would die. And it's with the powers that were put into the Constitution, because the Constitution wasn't supposed to be a living, breathing document. It was supposed to be pretty cut and dried because they wanted to control the balance of power. So now that they've got it under control, people have subverted it.
no, we have never had control. If you think about it,
No,
the
we weren't
people
supposed to.
have never
Never.
had a
Never.
voice in how our system runs. You know, we have the elites, we have the House of Representatives, and then, you know, that's considered a lesser body. They're not as important, their votes aren't as heavily weighted. And you have senators, right, who hail from every state, and it's virtually and it's the two-party system that we have adhered to. And those tiny minorities have used the filibuster. They've used gerrymandering. They use these tools, both Democrats and Republicans. I'm not giving Democrats a kiss here.
Oh, no. It
We
goes
have
both ways.
used those tools in the same ways. That's why we won't get rid of them. I really
Right.
think they won't get rid of them because they're tools that can be used. And they don't make any sense.
Well, you know, Marie, entitled wealthy white men are in both parties jockeying to keep the power, okay, the power structure. And the last rebel we had was FDR, and he was exclusionary. He only included white people in the New Deal. As much as I love FDR, he's my favorite president, that New Deal needs to be inclusive for everyone who lives here. It was racist in and of itself. So we need to talk about the things we need to do. In Washington, D.C., which is a territory, more people live there by twice as much as that live in Rhode Island or Delaware, but they have no senatorial or House of Representatives members to represent them. The other one is Puerto Rico, that has millions of people living there. Also, Wyoming has 2 senators. Puerto Rico has 0. Wyoming has like 400,000 people. Puerto Rico is over 2 million people
There
on
are
that
multiple
island.
states
The
that are
power,
smaller than Puerto Rico and DC. But here's what I want to mention.
right.
So we talk about history, right? And the reason why in the compromise that they decided to put DC, put the capital and create DC and not give it statehood was because they believed that people
Yep.
living there would have undue influence over politicians.
Yep.
Ha! Enter Citizens United! Are you kidding me? The people that live there? But the communication has changed, and our entire approach, we understand so much more. The power is not seeing my representative on the street now. The power
No.
is anywhere across the world. Trump had
Power has,
Russian fans,
yeah.
you
I was
know.
going to say, international banking allows rubles to be converted to US dollars very easily. And we've seen that over and over and over again. We're looking at you, Matt Gates. And
Oh my gosh, I can't even. You're getting all right. So, guys, I just want to let you know that apparently Matt Gaetz was speaking yesterday to Fox News
about
about
Nestor?
about why he let Nestor go to spring break because Nestor is apparently a freshman in college, but he was a page working for him 4 years ago. Huh? I don't know. Anyway, side note: we need to get rid of Matt Gaetz. That'll solve all the world's problems. Just kidding, Jim
Nestor.
Jordan, Mitch McConnell. There's so many more of you.
I know. So
So we
here's
need
the
to
thing
make
that Robert
DC and
Reich
Puerto
said.
Rico a state.
State.
And
And
the reason we would make Puerto Rico and DC states are because, like Heidi said, they have more population than many of our states. They have no representation. DC actually pays 21% more in federal taxes.
Texas,
And we saw what happened in the insurgents. The actual city
January
of
6th.
DC had no authority to issue additional troops or help. They have to
Nope.
depend on the federal government, and clearly
Right.
it's a nightmare. So they
It is.
deserve to have representation. And
Right.
if we do that, then we get two more senators. Now let's get crazy and include the brown people south, which we might do now that we have a Democrat in the White House. Puerto
Yeah.
Rico. Puerto Rico should be a state without a doubt. And so
Two
then that would be
million
54
Americans plus.
senators.
Well, and the thing is, Marie, and think about the bonus for the flag making industry. Oh, I'd have to, I'd have to buy a whole bunch of new flags, and so would you, to be able to. But that's one of the arguments against it. I just want you to know. Oh, we can't fly a flag with 50 stars then because we'd have to get new, 52 stars. And like,
Seriously.
really. So here's why that's so important. You have huge amounts of American citizens in two diverse areas of the United States, Washington, D.C., and Puerto Rico, that have no rights for representation in Congress. So we need to give them rights. Now, why haven't we given them rights? They're black and brown people, mostly. A few
Well,
white people.
and let's not forget,
Voter
because
suppression.
we have Jeffersonian Republicans who still cling to the idea of a centralized power in individual areas, not willing to give it up for the greater good. And that's been the
Right.
fundamental philosophy throughout history. A small group band together and create royal havoc. Now, usually when groups band together, good things happen. Unfortunately, like the founders knew was going to happen, good things are not happening. So then we roll
Yeah.
into the filibuster. And Heidi and I have done the filibuster show a couple of times. We have a big deep dive coming out on our Unroll about the filibuster, so we'll
Yeah.
be posting that. But the importance of getting rid of the filibuster can't be understated because of the way it was conceived and purely hypothetical in its origination. And the way it has been manipulated is indicative of what the foundation of our nation was about. Yet
Right.
those exploiting it don't seem to really get that. They're taking what the intention was, and they're the ones that scream constitutional intention, and they're the
Right.
ones that twist it. It's very frustrating. So if we get rid of the filibuster, we will no longer have to have 60 votes. Remember, 60 votes. You have to have 60 yeses before you can even bring a bill
Even
to the floor to debate.
to talk about it. just to talk about it. And the thing is people can call on the filibuster rule and then they can leave and go home for the weekend. They don't have to stay there and talk it through like Mr. Smith goes to Washington. It doesn't look like that. They just say filibuster and everybody leaves and goes home for the weekend or goes out to dinner.
They
And
file
then
a paper, actually.
yep.
They
I
send
know.
an
I was trying to make it
email. I know.
oversimplified. Yeah.
But it's true.
So,
It's as simple as yelling filibuster. But
yeah.
if the Democrats are not willing to consider eliminating the filibuster, then they do have the ability to change the rules of the filibuster.
Back to
And
closer to what it was before, like Mr. Smith goes to Washington, where you have to take the floor and talk your points through
and
instead of going filibuster, going home for the weekend. You know?
someone told me that that wouldn't have the impact that you think it would. And I said, I'm pretty sure that
Oh
the
yeah,
senators and the
seems
parties as a
entitled.
whole are not going to take that chance around times that are big election pushes. And they are not going to sacrifice their own personal time. Plus, they'd be filmed, and everyone would know the nonsense, and they'd have to be on public record
Who was it that
explaining why.
somebody read Green Eggs and Ham, I think, one time to filibuster. It's just the stupidity that we see with our elected congressmen to avoid doing their job. And the problem with the filibuster and the problem with all of these issues, these 4 issues that we're going over today, is that it impedes the work of the people and it keeps the corporations and the elite few in power.
And even if there's a group of elites who are powerful and they all want what the rest of the country wants, this tiny group can block it and stop it. So, like, look at the stimulus bill that we talked about, the American Recovery Act, right?
God.
We see this, and it gets so much opposition. 70% of Americans are in favor of it. Actually, 85%, including Republicans, are in favor of the new infrastructure bill that's planned. But
Right.
Republicans are blocking it. Why?
Right.
Your
Why?
constituents want it, but
Oh,
they
it's
don't care.
job,
It's good for America, but they
Safe
don't
roads,
care
safe bridges,
because they would
trench
lose
canals.
their power to
Right.
have as a block.
You know, here's the thing, Murray. They would rather Iowa, Pacific Iowa, flood again because the Missouri River hasn't been dredged and the locks aren't fixed, than do their damn job and make sure those people and that property survives. And that's criminal. That's criminal behavior, Mitch McConnell, to prove that you are more powerful, Grim Reaper, Mitch McConnell,
And to
Moscow
hold
Mitch.
those special interests, because if I'm holding the power from having a green energy deal, it's because my campaign and my power comes from the money that I get from certain industries. That's just
Money,
how
money,
it
money,
works,
money, money.
right? And
Fossil
instead of
fuel,
looking for a
they rule the
way,
world.
yeah. And so we talk about how the American public is not represented. We talk about
Nope.
that in Congress, how the number of people are not representative, of America as a whole. How we have
Gerrymandering.
far fewer people of color, indigenous. Now we're getting more, but it's still significantly less than the percentages. So they're not getting representation to begin with. Then you throw in archaic systems that were never intended to be used, like the filibuster, like Heidi's going to ticket right now, the Electoral College.
So
Got to get rid of
the
that.
the Electoral College was something designed to let the slave states stay slave states. You have to remember it was the Electoral College was an idea floated and formed in the infancy of our country. And when our country finally decided that it was no longer going to be a slavery-based country, and we had a civil war about that, which the side that didn't want slavery won, did not want slavery won. I don't care. You're not Southern if you're from Illinois. Good God. That's an embarrassing conversation I had with somebody the other day. I just, Murray, they came out with all of these ideas for the Electoral College to give the minority population majority control.
You mean just
And
like when we were doing the actual Constitution, we gave up
Right.
significant rights for the people by putting in archaic procedures that a tiny amount of people in power could continue to exploit. It's almost like Thomas
A tiny
Jefferson was a maniacal bastard who set this all up. I'm telling you, it's
I'm
true.
so sorry. I have a cat named Thomas Jefferson. We have a lot of cats named after Hamilton characters, and he's one of them. And he's a nice cat. So,
So
but let me tell you about the
well, yeah, look at the electoral
electoral
college.
college.
You were telling me,
So
and I didn't
nine of
realize
the
it. Yeah.
yeah, that 9 of the last 10 elections, the Republican Party has lost the popular vote. So more people did not want them to be president than be president, which affected, of course, W. W. Bush the second, winning over Al Gore, which you could argue that the reason we have two unwinnable wars is because of that election. And then, of course, Trump was put in power over Clinton, and Clinton won by, 3 million votes, and should not have, or should have been president if we went by popular vote, which every other president, except for Benjamin Harrison, the 28th election we ever held, Benjamin Harrison lost it, or won the electoral college, but lost the popular vote to Grover Cleveland, and then they swapped places in the 29th election. So you have to go from the 28th election all the way up to the 26th election, all the way up to the 54th election, which was W over Gore, to have a president installed by electoral college instead of popular vote, and then to the 58th election, which was Trump over Clinton, Hillary Clinton. And you can say, without a doubt, the presidency and the Trump presidency were unmitigated disasters.
I never thought I'd call W a
W.
good
Bush
president. He looks good compared to the last
no,
one we had.
comparatively. But this is the problem with archaic measures, is they build upon themselves until you get an insurrection on January 6th.
They build
Because
upon
people
themselves.
don't.
Well, but and yes and no. You're right. You're right. You're right. Even those insurrectionists were fed lies and built their own
From the
hatred.
top,
But we're not.
Marie.
I'm not excusing their behavior in any way, shape, or form.
Oh, no.
But that's why
They
we
need
have
to
Black
cry.
Lives Matter protests. That's why we have the Capitol insurrection. Even that,
Right.
it's because they don't believe that their voice matters, that they're being heard.
No,
They thought it was stolen, but that's a failure of our educational system and allowing media to exist that doesn't give
God,
actual
Marie.
facts.
I don't even know if you can blame that on the education system. Somebody actually has to open a book and try. And after a while, we know the education system in the United States is just going to pass you through until you can walk away because they're sick of dealing with you. We all went to school with people like that. We all did. My brother was one of them, my younger brother, not my older brother. Okay, so we need to get rid of the electoral college. And what some states are doing, and we have 16 states doing this now, is whoever wins the popular vote, they give all their votes.
And that
There,
means
all their electoral
out of
votes
other
go to popular vote.
states. So we're talking these states. I didn't know this because I don't not you get your areas of specialty.
Illinois is one of
Electoral
them.
college. I don't like it, but so if the state,
Yeah.
oh, but that's the state. That's the voters in the state. Whoever wins the
Yeah.
state gets all of the votes.
So in pre-show we were talking about Massachusetts. So we'll use that. They have 10 electoral votes. So Massachusetts, had it gone for Trump, but Biden won the popular vote, their electoral votes would have gone automatically for Biden. And we have all of those states, the 16 states that do that are pretty much blue states, north of the Mason-Dixon line type of makeup anyway, which is to be expected because you're not going to get that from Mississippi or Alabama or North Carolina. I don't see that happening. They're just not moving very fast. They're welfare states where they take significant more money from the U.S. government than they pay in, and they're just not interested. The government's working for them right now because if they pay in $2 million, they get back $6 million, and that's working for them. So there's no incentive for them to change. So, and I think we should incentivize them, but that's a topic for another day. So, but for those 16 states to do that, to take that initiative, if you can get more states to do that, but you're going to have to work on the swing states, and that could end up in court. But we need to consider that. Marie. We really, truly do. And we also need to make sure that when Puerto Rico and Washington, D.C. become states, that their electoral college votes matter too, because that would swing things completely.
Well, we are going to have a major problem, even if we abolish the Electoral College, if we allow gerrymandering and voter suppression to continue, which is why it's imperative to pass H.R. 1. There is it
Yes.
shouldn't be up to states to decide. We saw this in the beginning of the foundation of our nation. We saw this during the Reconstruction era. We have seen this every step of the way. History, let's not repeat ourselves. We have to
Yeah.
take that away from states and make it national so it's fair across the board.
We can't have minority rule anymore, Murray.
No, we
Like
can't.
women are the majority in this country over men, but we have the smallest voice. We have less voice than most other minorities or majorities. We have nothing. There's nothing that we can do as women that takes back our power except for this. And I think as the largest majority treated like a minority population, it's going to be up to women to carry this message through to fruition. We've got a lot of strong allies. Murray's and my husband's are strong allies they're strong feminists, They're really down for this. So,
All three of my boys.
but HR1 would help end gerrymandering. It would help end voter suppression.
It
And
would
let me tell
guarantee
you,
that every state had to provide unexcused absentee ballots and mail-in voting.
right.
And that seems like a big burden, but we saw every single state in the nation, counties that enacted these policies that wanted and it's not we haven't we push this at a federal level, but it's the House, it's the state level Republican Party that does its best to disenfranchise black, brown, low income voters.
I just was reading a story about in Texas, they have a thing called Souls to the Polls, where in
Yes.
early voting after church, they all get in a bus and they go to the polls to vote early. So what did Texas do? Because it was so successful and they have a huge governor's
They
race coming
passed
up
a
next year,
law
no
saying
voting on Sunday.
yeah, but that'll be contested. I'm hoping the ACLU has
I'm
has a look at
hoping,
it,
Marie.
but
Sometimes
it
I feel
shouldn't
like we're
be
living
able.
back when the
Think
earth is
about.
cooling.
I mean, just think about this for just a quick second. How much time and how many resources were involved in creating that bill to take away souls to the polls, to deny voting on Sundays, right? So, how many hours? Got to be hundreds, right? Unless they just have this like pocket of bad shit they pull out whenever they need to do something horrible to someone. So, it kind of makes you wonder. Thousands of hours were put into making it harder for people to
People to
vote.
vote. Yep.
And we didn't put thousands of hours into things that make a difference. And that, guys, is absolutely, without a doubt, the reason that we need to end these four and end minority rule.
We need to end minority rule, Murray, because nothing is getting done. Our democracy
Because they're
is
spending thousands of hours on a state level to write a bill that takes away the opportunity for people to vote that they've become accustomed to. So then once it passes the
that are
state,
part
we
of
have
the
to
white
tie
minority.
up our courts in
yeah.
order. I mean,
Because I'm gonna say, Donald Trump made this huge, big, blathering mess out of voting by mail, right? But he had voted by mail in the last presidential election, and you know what? He took a ballot to mail in for the municipal elections in Dade County, Florida. So, you can't take your advice from him because he doesn't follow his own advice.
well, and the reason they don't
So,
want mail-in voting is based off of the ability to push people to not vote, and that is voter ID
Right.
laws. Well, there's going to be fraud if they're using, and signatures have to match. Whose signature doesn't change? They're all archaic ideas designed to hold on to this tiny bit of power that Thomas Jefferson screwed all of the United States with. So the next time I hear Thomas Jefferson, I'm gonna punch
don't
that
kick
person.
my cat. Don't kick my cat.
Well, I won't kick Heidi's cat because I don't like cats, but I just kind of stay away from them. So,
I
guys,
love-
we want you to make sure that you tune in, like, subscribe, and share. Because if you don't, your friends will never get this kind of wisdom ever. So bringing news and views to you that hopefully you can use. From the Great Red Divide, Heartland Mamas podcast. You can also find our hour-long show for deep dives on independent radio. Please, guys, like I said, like, subscribe, share, and if you're feeling it, make a donation. You can do that at our webpage. Donations and sponsors are how we keep the lights on around here. So thanks, everybody. Remember, Heartland Mamas.
mamas.com. And I want everybody today to go to YouTube and like our page, please, because it helps
And
grow
share.
our
Heartland Mamas.
But if you like our page, .com. See you later. Bye, everybody.
Bye. I always have a problem with this, the closing.
Oh,